The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Jnana Yoga, Chapter 3, Maya and Illusion, Part 2. We are all after the golden fleece. Every one of us thinks that this will be his. Every reasonable man sees that his chance is perhaps 1 in a 20 million, and yet struggles for it. And this is Maya. Death is stalking day and night over this earth of ours. But at the same time, we think we shall live eternally. A question was once asked of King Yudhishthir: what is the most wonderful thing of this earth? And the king replied, every day people are dying around us, and yet men think they will never die. And this is Maya. These tremendous contradictions in our intellect, in our knowledge, yea, in the facts of our life face us on all sides. A reformer arises and wants to remedy the evils that are existing in a certain nation. And before they have been remedied, 1,000 other evils arise in another place. It is like an old house that is falling. You patch it up in one place, and the ruin extends to another. In India, our reformers cry and preach against the evils of enforced widowhood. In the West, non-marriage is the great evil. Help the unmarried on the one side, they are suffering. Help the widows on the other, they are suffering. It is like chronic rheumatism. You drive from the head and it goes to the body. You drive it from there and it goes to the feet. You drive it from there and it goes to the feet. Reformers arise and preach that learning, wealth, and culture should not be in the hands of a select few, and they do their best to make them accessible to all. These may bring more happiness to some, but perhaps as culture comes, physical happiness lessens. The knowledge of happiness brings the knowledge of unhappiness. Which way shall we then go? The less amount of material prosperity that we enjoy is causing the same amount of misery elsewhere. This is the law. The young perhaps do not see it clearly, but those who have lived long enough and those who have struggled enough will understand it. And this is Maya. These things are going on day and night, and to find a solution of this problem is impossible. Why should it be so? It is impossible to answer this because the question cannot be logically formulated. There is neither how nor why, in fact. We only know that it is, and that we cannot help it. Even to grasp it, to draw an exact image of it in our mind, is beyond our power. How can we solve the problem then? Maya is a statement of the fact of this universe, of how it is going on. People generally get frightened when these things are told to them, but bold we must be. Hiding facts is not a way to find a remedy. As you all know, a hare hunted by dogs puts its head down and thinks it's safe. So when we run into optimism, we do just like the hare. But that is no remedy. There are objections against this, but you may remark that they are generally from people who possess many of the good things of life. In this country, England, it is very difficult to be a pessimist. Everyone tells me how wonderfully the world is going on, how progressive. But what he himself is his own world. Old questions arise. Christianity must be the only true religion of the world because Christian nations are prosperous. But that assertion contradicts itself because the prosperity of the Christian nation depends on the misfortune of non-Christian nations. There must be some to prey on. Suppose the whole world were to become Christian, then the Christian nations would become poor because there would be no non-Christian nation for them to prey upon. Thus, the argument kills itself. Animals are living upon plants, men upon animals, worst of all, one upon one another, the strong upon the weak. This is going on everywhere, and this is Maya. What solution do you find for this? We hear every day many explanations. And we are told that in the long run all will be good. Taking it for granted that this is possible, why should there be this diabolical way of doing good? Why cannot good be done through good instead of through these diabolical methods? The descendants of the human beings of today will be happy. But why must there be all this suffering now? There is no solution. This is Maya. Again, we often hear that it is one of the features of evolution that it eliminates evil, and that this evil, being continually eliminated from the world, at last only good will remain. That is very nice to hear, but it panders to the vanity of those who have enough of this world's goods, who have not a hard struggle to face every day and are not being crushed under the wheel of this so-called evolution. It is very good and comforting indeed to such fortunate ones. The common herd may suffer, but they do not care. Let them die, they are of no consequence. Very good, yet this argument is fallacious from the beginning to end. It takes for granted in the first place that manifested good and evil in this world are two absolute realities. In the second place, it makes, at still worse, an assumption that the amount of good is an increasing quantity and the amount of evil is a decreasing quantity. So if evil is being continually eliminated in this way by what they call evolution, then there will come a time when all this evil will be eliminated and what remains will be all good. Very easy to say. But can it be proved that evil is a lessening quantity? Take for instance the man who lives in a forest, who does not know how to cultivate the mind, cannot read a book, and has never heard of such a thing as writing. If he is severely wounded, he will soon become all right. While we die, even if we get a scratch, machines are making things cheap, making for progress and evolution. But millions are being crushed that one may become rich. While one becomes rich, thousands at the same time become poorer and poorer, and whole masses of human beings are made slaves. That way it is going on. The animal man lives in the senses. If he does not have enough to eat, he is miserable. Or if something happens to his body, he is miserable. In the senses, both his misery and his happiness begin and end. As soon as this man progresses, as soon as his horizon of happiness increases, his horizon of unhappiness increases proportionately. The man in the forest does not know what it is to be jealous, to be in the law of courts, to pay taxes, to be blamed by society, to be ruled over day and night by the most tremendous tyranny that human diabolism ever invented, which pries into the secrets of every human heart. He does not know how man becomes 1,000 times more diabolical than any other animal, with all his vain knowledge and with all his pride. Thus, it is that as we emerge out of the senses, and at the same time we have to develop higher powers of suffering too. The nerves become finer and are capable of more suffering. In every society we find that the ignorant common man, when abused, does not feel much, but he feels a good thrashing. But the gentleman cannot bear a single word of abuse. He has become so finely nerved. Misery has increased with his susceptibility to happiness. This does not go much to prove the evolutionist case. As we increase our power to be happy, we also increase our power to suffer. And sometimes I am inclined to think that if we increase our power to become happy in arithmetical progression, We shall increase, on the other hand, our power to become miserable in geometric propagation, progression. We who are progressing more know that the more we progress, the more avenues are open to pain as well as to pleasure. And this is Maya. Thus, we find that Maya is not a theory for the explanation of the world, it is simply a statement of facts as they exist. That the very basis of our being is contradiction, and that the very basis, and that everywhere we have to move through this tremendous contradiction. That wherever there is good, there must also be evil, and wherever there is evil, there must be some good. Wherever there is life, death must follow its shadow, and everyone who smiles will have to weep, and vice versa. Nor can this state of things be remedied. We may verily imagine that there will be a place where there will be only good and no evil, where we shall only smile and never weep. This is impossible in the very nature of things, for the conditions will remain the same. Wherever there is a power of producing a smile in us, there lurks the power of producing tears. Wherever there is a power of producing happiness, there lurks somewhere the power of making us feel miserable. Thus, the Vedanta philosophy is neither optimistic nor pessimistic. It voices both these views and takes things as they are. It admits that this world is a mixture of good and evil, happiness and misery, and that to increase one must have, of necessity, increase the other. There will never be perfectly good or bad in this world, because the very idea is a contradiction in terms. The great secret revealed by this analysis is that good and bad are not two cut and dried separate existences. There is not one thing in this world of ours which you cannot label as good and good alone, and there is not one thing in this universe which you can label as bad and bad alone. The very same phenomena which is appearing to be good now may appear to be bad tomorrow. The same thing which is producing misery in one may produce happiness in another. The fire that burns the child may cook a good meal for the starving man. The same nerves that carry the sensations of misery also carry the sensations of happiness. The only way to stop evil, therefore, is to stop good also. There is no other way. To stop death, we have to stop life also. Life without death and happiness without misery are contradictions, and neither can be found alone, because each one of them is but a different manifestation of the same thing. What I thought to be good yesterday, I do not think to be good now. When I look back upon my life and see what one of my ideals at different times, I find at one time my ideal was driven to drive a strong pair of horses, and at another time I thought that if I could make a certain kind of sweetmeat, I would be perfectly happy. Later on, I imagined that I should be entirely satisfied if I had a wife and children and plenty of money. Today, I laugh at all these ideals as mere childish nonsense. The Vedanta says that there must come a time when we shall look back and laugh at the ideals which make us afraid of giving up our individuality. Each one of us wants to keep this body for an indefinite period of time, thinking that we shall be very happy, but there will come a time when we shall laugh at this idea. Now, if such be the truth, we are truly in a state of hopeless contradiction. Neither existence nor non-existence, neither misery nor happiness, but a mixture of them. What then is the use of Vedanta and all other philosophies and religions? And above all, what is the use of doing good work? This is a question that comes to the mind. If it is true that you cannot do good without evil, that whenever you try to create happiness, there will always be misery. People will ask you, what is the use of doing good? The answer is, in the first place, that we must work for lessening misery, for that is the only way to make ourselves happy. Every one of us finds it out sooner or later in our lives. The bright ones find it out a little earlier, and the dull ones a little later. The dull ones pay very dearly for the discovery, and the bright ones less dearly. In the second place, we must do our part, because that is the only way of getting out of this life of contradiction. Both the forces of good and evil will keep the universe alive for us until we awake from our dreams and give up this building of mud pies. That lesson we shall have to learn, and it will take a long, long time to learn it.